Most people think old age is about decline and waiting for death, but I've discovered 9 deadly mistakes that guarantee misery in your final decades. If you're making even 3 of these, your golden years will become your darkest nightmare. Stay until the end. The 9th mistake will shock you. Silent poison. When I observe elderly people in our modern world, I see something that deeply troubles my spirit. I see human beings who have survived decades of life, accumulated years of experience, weathered countless storms, yet they sit in corners of nursing homes or shuffle through their days as if they are already dead. They breathe, but they do not live. They exist, but they do not thrive. And the most tragic truth is that this living death is not inevitable. It is chosen, moment by moment, through mistakes that poison the soul. The first fatal mistake that destroys old age is the poison of resentment. I have met countless elderly individuals whose hearts have become graveyards of old grudges, ancient hurts, and bitter memories that they tend like sacred flames. They speak endlessly of who wronged them 30 years ago, how their children disappointed them, how life cheated them of what they deserved. This resentment becomes their identity, their primary source of energy, their reason for waking up each morning. But resentment is acid that corrodes the container that holds it. Every day you choose to nurture old wounds. You choose to remain imprisoned by the past. You become a slave to people who may not even remember what they did to you, to situations that no longer exist, to pain that serves no purpose except to make your present moment unbearable. The elderly who carry this poison speak with bitter tongues, attract conflict wherever they go, and wonder why their families avoid them, why friends stop calling, why their final years feel so desperately lonely. I have watched this mistake destroy more lives than any disease. The body may be aging, but it is the spirit that dies first, suffocated by the weight of unforgiveness. When you hold on to resentment, you are not punishing those who hurt you. You are torturing yourself every single day. You are choosing to relive your worst moments instead of creating new joy. You are allowing the past to steal whatever time you have left. The antidote to this poison is not pretending that wrongs never happened. It is understanding that forgiveness is not about them. It is about you. It is about refusing to let old pain dictate your present peace. It is about choosing freedom over the familiar comfort of being a victim. Dangerous isolation. The second fatal mistake that guarantees misery in old age is the slow suicide of isolation. I watch as people gradually withdraw from life, from relationships, from community, telling themselves they are becoming more independent when they are actually becoming more desperate. They convince themselves they don't need anyone, that people are too much trouble, that it's easier to be alone than to deal with the complications of human connection. This isolation rarely happens suddenly. It begins with small choices, declining invitations because it seems like too much effort, avoiding phone calls because conversations feel draining, stopping activities because they remind you of younger, better days. Each withdrawal feels reasonable in the moment, but together they build an invisible fortress that keeps out not just problems, but also joy, love, and the life force that comes from meaningful connection with others. I have seen elderly people who go days without speaking to another human being, who have no one to share their thoughts with, no one who notices if they are struggling, no one who cares whether they wake up tomorrow. They sit in apartments filled with memories of people who no longer visit, surrounded by photographs of gatherings they no longer attend, slowly disappearing from the world before their bodies stop breathing. The tragedy is that this isolation often comes from pride disguised as independence. They tell themselves they don't want to be a burden, but what they really fear is being vulnerable, being seen as needy, admitting that they still have the same fundamental human need for connection that they had when they were young. So they choose the slow death of loneliness over the risk of reaching out. But humans are not meant to live in isolation. We are social beings, tribal creatures who need community to thrive, no matter our age. The elderly who age well understand this truth. They invest in relationships. They stay connected to their communities. They continue to contribute their wisdom and experience to others. They know that giving and receiving love is not a luxury. It is essential for spiritual survival. Mental stagnation. The third fatal mistake is allowing your mind to become a stagnant pond where no new ideas can grow. I encounter elderly people who stopped learning the day they retired, who stopped challenging themselves intellectually, who spend their days consuming mindless entertainment and wondering why they feel so empty, so purposeless, so mentally foggy. The mind is like a muscle. When you stop using it, it atrophies. When you stop feeding it new information, new challenges, new experiences, it begins to feed on itself, recycling old thoughts, old patterns, old limitations. You become mentally rigid, unable to adapt to change, unable to see new possibilities, unable to grow beyond who you were decades ago. I have watched brilliant people become shadows of themselves because they believed learning was for the young. They stopped reading challenging books, stopped engaging in meaningful conversations, stopped exploring new ideas or developing new skills. They told themselves they were too old to change, too set in their ways to grow, too tired to think deeply about anything, and slowly their minds became prisons of their own making. The most vibrant elderly people I know are those who remain students of life until their final breath. They learn new languages, explore new technologies, read books that challenge their assumptions, engage in debates that stretch their thinking. They understand that mental growth is not about age. It is about attitude, about curiosity, about refusing to accept that your best thinking is behind you. When you keep your mind active and growing, you maintain your sense of wonder, your ability to contribute wisdom to the world, your capacity for joy and discovery. You remain relevant not because you're trying to be young, but because you're committed to being fully alive at any age. Physical neglect. The fourth fatal mistake is surrendering your body to decay without a fight. I see elderly people who treat their bodies like broken machines, accepting pain, weakness, and limitation as inevitable consequences of aging. They stop moving, stop exercising, stop caring for their physical vessel, and then wonder why every day feels like a struggle against their own flesh. Your body is not your enemy. It is your partner in this life experience. It has carried you through decades of living, adapted to countless challenges, healed from injuries and illnesses, and deserves your respect and care, not your neglect and resignation. When you abandon your body, you abandon your ability to engage fully with life. The tragedy is that much of what we call normal aging is actually the result of lifestyle choices, not biological inevitability. The stiffness, the weakness, the chronic pain that many elderly people accept as their fate, much of this can be prevented, improved, or even reversed through consistent, appropriate physical care. I have seen people in their 80s who move with more grace and strength than people in their 50s. The difference is not genetics, it is daily choices. They chose to keep moving when it would have been easier to sit. They chose to maintain their strength when others chose comfort. They chose to treat their bodies as temples worthy of care, not as burdens to be endured. Physical vitality in old age is not about competing with your younger self or trying to recapture your peak athletic performance. It is about maintaining the basic functions that allow you to live independently, to engage with the world around you, to serve others, and to experience the simple pleasure of inhabiting a body that works in harmony with your spirit. Purpose abandonment. The fifth fatal mistake is believing that retirement means retiring from life itself. I witness countless individuals who spend decades building careers, developing skills, accumulating wisdom and experience, only to throw it all away the moment they reach some arbitrary age decided by society. They tell themselves they've earned the right to do nothing, to contribute nothing, to matter to no one. But humans are not designed for purposelessness. We are meaning-making creatures who need to feel that our lives matter, that we have something valuable to offer, that our existence serves something greater than our own comfort and entertainment. When you abandon purpose, you abandon the very thing that makes life worth living. I have seen formerly dynamic, accomplished people become depressed, anxious, and physically ill within months of retirement because they no longer had any reason to get out of bed, no challenges to overcome, no goals to pursue, no way to contribute their gifts to the world. They thought they wanted freedom from responsibility, but what they got was freedom from meaning. The elderly who thrive are those who understand that their purpose evolves but never disappears. They may no longer work in the same capacity, but they find new ways to serve, to teach, to contribute, to make a difference. They mentor younger people, volunteer for causes they believe in, create art, write their stories, or simply become sources of wisdom and love for their families and communities. Purpose is not something you earn through career achievement. It is something you choose through conscious decision to remain engaged with life, to continue growing, to keep offering your unique gifts to the world regardless of your age or circumstances. Spiritual emptiness. The sixth fatal mistake is facing the reality of mortality without any spiritual foundation, any sense of connection to something greater than your individual existence. As the body ages and physical pleasures become less accessible, as friends and family members begin to die, as you confront the undeniable truth that your time on earth is limited, you need something deeper than material success or physical comfort to sustain your spirit. I have counseled many elderly people who spent their entire lives accumulating possessions, achievements, and experiences, only to discover in their final decades that none of these things provide comfort when facing the deeper questions of existence. Who am I beyond my roles and accomplishments? What is the meaning of this life I have lived? What happens when this body stops functioning? How do I face death without terror? Without spiritual development, these questions become sources of existential dread rather than opportunities for profound growth and peace. The elderly who have neglected their spiritual lives often become consumed with fear, bitterness, and desperate attempts to deny the reality of aging and death. They cling to youth, to material possessions, to anything that helps them avoid confronting the spiritual dimension of human existence. But the elderly who have cultivated spiritual wisdom, whether through religious practice, meditation, philosophy, or simply deep contemplation of life's mysteries, approach their final years with a sense of completion and peace. They understand that they are part of something larger than themselves, that their lives have meaning beyond their individual achievements, that death is not an ending but a transformation. Spiritual development is not about adopting specific beliefs or practices. It is about developing the inner resources that allow you to face life's ultimate challenges with courage, wisdom, and grace. Financial destruction. The seventh fatal mistake is financial irresponsibility that turns your golden years into decades of poverty, dependence, and constant worry about money. I have seen people who earned good incomes throughout their working lives end up destitute in old age because they never learned to save, invest, or plan for their future needs. Financial security in old age is not about being wealthy. It is about having enough resources to maintain your dignity, independence, and basic comfort when you can no longer earn income through work. It is about not becoming a burden to your children, not having to choose between medicine and food, not living in constant fear about how you will survive financially. The tragedy is that financial planning for old age is not complicated or mysterious, but it requires discipline, sacrifice, and the ability to delay gratification, qualities that our instant gratification culture actively discourages. People spend decades living paycheck to paycheck, buying things they don't need with money they don't have, telling themselves they'll worry about retirement later. But later always comes, and when it does, the consequences of financial irresponsibility become brutally clear. The stress of financial insecurity in old age affects every aspect of life: your health, your relationships, your mental well-being, your ability to enjoy whatever time you have left. The elderly who age gracefully almost always have one thing in common. They learned early to live below their means, to save consistently, to invest wisely, and to plan for their future needs. They understood that money is not the source of happiness, but financial security is essential for peace of mind. Final revelation. The eighth fatal mistake is treating death as an enemy to be feared, rather than as a natural completion of life to be prepared for, with wisdom and grace. Our culture teaches us to deny death, to fight it at all costs, to see any acknowledgement of mortality as morbid or defeatist, but this denial creates the very fear and suffering it seeks to avoid. I have worked with many dying people, and I can tell you that those who suffer most are not those whose bodies are failing, They are those whose spirits are unprepared for the reality of death. They have spent so much energy avoiding thoughts of mortality that when death becomes undeniable, they face it with terror, regret, and desperate attempts to bargain for more time. But the ninth and most fatal mistake, the one that guarantees a miserable old age, is refusing to accept that aging is not about becoming less than you were. It is about becoming more yourself than you have ever been. It is the culmination of everything you have learned, experienced, and become. It is your opportunity to embody the deepest wisdom of your life. When you fight against aging instead of embracing it as your final masterpiece, when you try to remain young instead of becoming magnificently old, when you see your wrinkles as failures instead of maps of your journey, you miss the profound beauty and power that comes with having lived a full life. The elderly who inspire us are not those who look youngest. They are those who wear their age like a crown, who have transformed their experiences into wisdom, their scars into strength, their years into depth of character that only comes from having truly lived.